So just, you know, be aware that I'm broadcasting. It's fine. You can keep doing what you're doing. Taryn apparently thinks building Lego crap at work is work or whatever. Yeah. Lego
bot.
You know, brain hurricane or whatever it is. See, I knew it. He can't resist it. He has to correct me.
Brain hurricane's
Even though he knows, like he absolutely knows on every possible level that I'm doing it on purpose, he can't resist.
Broom face.
He has to correct me. So wait, sorry, hold on a second. Is Lego Mindstorm related to Meccano?
Meccano? No.
See, he did it again. Meccano.
Was that on purpose that time?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
And he's leaving. Hey, and you guys are coming on board. Welcome to the WAN show. It's going to be me and John here today. We're going to be telling you about what's new in tech. We're going to be trolling Taryn, and it'll be up to you guys to decide which of those things is better and or more important. And of course, you're here to find out why exactly it is that we're late today. Okay, so I would love to tell you about that, but I went and I left it over there. Well, whatever. I was working on a video. Actually, yeah, Pella, do you mind grabbing that green and black video card that's kind of next to the inventory station? Sweet. Pella's going to bring it over for us. Oh, you haven't been introduced to Pella. He's kind of shy. I don't know if he's actually going to want to be on camera, but he works here.
He does.
He does.
You're
sometimes.
paying him, right?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. So he works here. Okay.
Yeah. I got people saying my pupils are huge. It could be all of the drugs that I took. It's not that easy to get amped up for WAN show.
How could they tell that your pupils are huge? The camera's not that high res. I mean.
Yay! Thank you. All right. So this is what I was working on: a $5,000 graphics card. Finding out just what makes it special. So it's a Quadro M6000, and there's a lot of discussion about these because they're very hard to get your hands on unless you have $5,000 that you want to trade for one of these. So I've seen people saying things all the way from Quadros can't run games to that Quadros run games better.
Neither of which are true.
Well, there's only one way to find out, and that's watching the episode of Holy Shite. That's going to be coming pretty soon.
Maybe I'm wrong. Stay tuned to find out.
Yeah. Now, some of you are probably kind of sitting here going, really, was that more important than starting the show on time? And the answer is normally no. Normally, that would not be more important than starting the show on time, but we ran into a bit of a production snafu. One of the videos that was supposed to go out this weekend on Vessel, the B-roll wasn't done, and then Brandon's out of office on a forced vacation right now. Seriously, the guy wouldn't take his time off.
Yeah, I know.
So he has, 7 weeks to take all of his time off because he hasn't booked off any, and Q4 is a blackout zone. Mm-hmm. And so Yvonne actually just assigned him days. And she was just like, you're not coming into the office on these days. And
is he going anywhere, or is he just kind of hanging out and just not being here?
I suspect he's like sitting at home dreaming of work.
Probably.
That's my best guess.
He's probably looking at camera gear.
He's probably like researching crap that he can hang in the lighting grid or whatever the case may be. All right. So let's get this show on the road. And that begins with, of course, after the excuses, the intro.
Roll it.
Wow, it's so nice having the stream work properly. The only thing that doesn't work properly is me being here on time. So you guys should just skip the intro and do the excuses. No, I already did the excuses. That's the whole point. All right, let's jump right into what I personally consider to be the big news this week. So the original article here is from WCCF Tech. When I saw this, I pretty much went bananas. Look at that. AMD Zen engineering sample benchmarks leak out. The Summit Ridge CPU is apparently faster than the Intel Core i5-4670 in the, whatever it is, yes, Ashes of the Singularity benchmark program. Yes, my friends, I just covered for a weird grammatical slip-up by pretending that the pauses were intentional.
It was very convincing.
That's a pro tip, by the way. I didn't get away with it, did I?
When I have your job one day, I'll keep that in mind.
Okay, all right, well, show up on time and work hard, and...
Other thing.
Yes. Then profit. Question mark, then profit. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. First of all, yes, I know. The source is WCCF Tech.
Bit of a rumor mill, but sometimes they do hit on things, so.
Bit of a rumor mill. I mean, it's one of those things where if you mill enough rumors, eventually you will end up with a loaf of truth.
I was just about to say loaf of truth bread. Read my mind. Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect.
See, we got synergy today, all right? And there are things that you can consider. There are things that you can do to sort of vet a particular rumor. So one of them is you can kind of go, okay, what's the evidence? So the evidence here is not a leak from AMD. It's a leak from a benchmark database. So that can be credible, or it can be non-credible, because some benchmarks, it's just a matter of like editing a text string somewhere, and you can make a product show up as though it is something else. Whereas other benchmarks, especially ones where the publisher in particular wouldn't really have any reason to act like it's something that it's not. This can be an excellent way of figuring out that yes, that is indeed pretty credible. So, for example, a leaked CPU-Z screenshot, maybe I wouldn't put too much stock in it.
Can you validate on CPU-Z?
A validated CPU-Z screenshot where the processor ID shows up as Intel Engineering Sample, whatever code name, usually those are pretty credible. Okay, number 2 is timing. Timing is huge. So AMD is figuring, like the old quote, if I recall correctly, you'll have to forgive me, AMD has changed the story a number of times on this, but the old quote was that they would ship Zen in late 2016. We are now getting towards, well, we're well into the second half of 2016. However, they did say that it slipped and should be shipping sometime in early 2017. The timing for this leak is perfect, because don't imagine for a second that a motherboard maker, remember, this is a new CPU and a new chipset. This isn't a microcode update for existing motherboards and chipsets.
Yeah, because it's been like, what, 5 years? That will make no sense at this point.
Exactly. Yeah. We are getting a new socket AM4. We are getting a new chipset with support for DDR4, finally. Support for PCI Express 3.0, finally. I mean, AMD has shipped multiple generations of graphics cards that support PCI Express technology that their CPUs and motherboards do not.
And even if you aren't, even if you're running like sort of a middle of the road or even a high-end GPU that's not going to saturate a PCIe 2 lane, it also means you can't take advantage of like the new storage options as well if you're running an older PCIe revision.
That's right. So basically, the timing is pretty good. Don't imagine for a second that motherboard makers don't have some of the first working silicon in their labs so they can start to make sure that their motherboards work, because AMD, again, this is a new platform. AMD cannot launch a CPU until the motherboards are not only completed in the design stage of things, but are actually tested and validated, mass-produced, packaged, and shipped.
Otherwise, you might as well just hang the CPUs on your Christmas tree.
With that said, okay, this is kind of a funny thing. AMD has done that before. They have launched CPUs before the motherboards were available.
Like to retail?
Yeah. I don't remember which one it was, but basically it wasn't a huge delay. It was like a couple of days, but like the CPUs were in stock.
You could build some hype that way, I guess, almost like pre-ordering a game.
I guess so. Pre-ordering a game, except it's a game that you also need to buy like a special controller for, and then you have to pay shipping on the order separately.
So like Guitar Hero, but to another degree.
Yeah, just ordering like a Guitar Hero like disc library, and then not having the plastic guitar yet. Exactly.
Okay.
So So basically what I'm trying to say, oh yeah, so consideration number 3 is what kind of performance we're seeing out of it. An early leak that indicates that Zen at $200 is going to crap all over the 6950X is probably designed by some AMD fanboy somewhere who wants people to be hyped up about AMD. That doesn't have much credibility. Whereas this rumor looks pretty solid. So let's get through this. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so the benchmarks. So first of all, and this is another important disclaimer, the benchmarks are of an engineering sample and may not be entirely representative of the retail product. With that said, the product development timelines on things like CPUs are so long that if motherboard manufacturers, and presumably that's where this ultimately came from at some point, but if motherboard manufacturers or anyone else who has their hands on motherboards and CPUs has silicon that they're actually using to validate anything, it's probably pretty far along. Like there are sometimes very early chips that are clocked much, much lower than the eventual retail ones end up being. But that's earlier on in the development process where there's still time to like tape it out again, for example. I don't think AMD is looking at if they're going to be launching the chip sometime in the next 3 to 6 months. Actually, okay, maybe. But that would be very tight. Like, I don't think we're going to see anything that's dramatically different from what's here. Maybe some tweaked clock speeds. Maybe this is a lower end SKU. Hard to say. It was tested with an unnamed motherboard and an RX 480 graphics card. And the 1080p average frame rates in Ashes of the Singularity showed 58 FPS for the Zen engineering sample compared to 65.4 on an Intel Core i7-4790 and 52.6 on a 4670K. So it's currently clocked at 2.8 gigahertz base, 3.2 gigahertz boost, and the benchmarks have since been pulled down by the source. So, AMD Zen, are you still hyped?
Well, I mean, okay, so I feel like the benchmark results are probably, so AOTS is it CPU bound at all? I feel like it might be.
There's some CPU.
Yeah, so we have a chip that's like on like a 14 nanometer process, and I know there's like a lot more to it than just the transistor size, but it's what Intel is currently using as well. So it's been such a long time since 2011 since we got anything new from them in terms of architecture. So.
It's also been completely redesigned by the team that was led by Jim Keller, who has actually since moved on to Tesla, which is sort of a shame, although AMD says that the groundwork has been laid for not only Zen, but improvements upon Zen over the next couple of years. Though, my concern then, if I were, say, for example, an AMD investor or an AMD fan, would be, well, gee, isn't that exactly what happened with the Athlon 64? Jim Keller led the team that designed it, and you iterated on it after he left, and then just kind of kept iterating on it after he left, and that was sort of all we had for the next, I don't know, 10 years. Sorry, let's get this straw poll up. So I just posted a straw poll. Are you guys still amped for Zen? Let's see the results here. Boom. 45% of you saying yes, with 9% of you saying no, and 45% of you saying you never were. So basically, in a nutshell, this has not really dampened the spirits of anyone who was legitimately excited about Zen in the first place. And you know what? I am actually in the same camp on this, because I don't need AMD to come back Athlon 64 style and take the performance crown. That is actually not what we need at all, because at the performance crown level is not where Intel has been stagnant. You look back at the last 3 or 4 generations, they've given us the 3960X, the first 6-core consumer, but they gave us a 6-core consumer, okay? The generation after that, they gave us a 6-core consumer for a little over half the price of the previous one, and a faster 6-core in the 4960X. The year after that, they bumped the core count, and they drove pricing of 6 cores. No, wait, no, that 5820 was still a, hold on. Yeah, 5820K was still a 6-core, if I recall correctly, right?
Yep. It just has fewer PCIe lanes than some of the other ones do.
That's right, 28 PCI Express lanes versus 40. So at the enthusiast level, okay, we got an 8-core, we still got a cheaper 6-core, and we got an even cheaper 6-core, but with fewer PCIe lanes, which quite frankly, for consumers, is completely irrelevant. You can quote me on that.
Especially these days with the SLI limitations.
That's right. And I mean, even in the previous days when the SLI wasn't limited, but you shouldn't have been doing it anyway.
Yeah, it's still scaled horribly, so just why? But,
exactly.
Yeah.
And then in the latest generation, we got a 10-core at the top range, which is sort of more of a moving the bar of the top range and less of delivering us a 10-core for what used to be
with
an 8-core.
With the price to match, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But then we still get 8 and 6 cores for, and I think in particular, the 6800K is a pretty compelling SKU on the enthusiast platform. You get 6 cores, really high clock speeds, and you get overclocking, and there. Okay.
It was the same thing that we said in our review, I think. I think it's because it retails for like, what, $350, somewhere in that ballpark. So
a little higher, I think.
So but it's not ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's doable.
It's not $1,000 or
Yeah.
$1,700. Yeah. It's not completely outlandish.
Yeah.
So actually, at the performance crown end of things, Intel hasn't been sitting on ass to quite the same degree. With that said, what they have done is they have ramped up pricing in the Performance Crown Halo tier. And the reason you can ramp up pricing of your Halo tier products is not necessarily because there isn't a competitor who's also releasing Halo tier products at a lower price. In fact, if they both had Halo tier products, you can bet that they would both be selling us CPUs for $1,000 a pop. In fact, it's happened. Everyone likes to treat AMD like they're these like good guys, champions of, cheap CPUs for consumers. They are not.
It's about strategy, like what market segment are you going to target?
That's right. You go back far enough, AMD introduced the $1,000 enthusiast processor. They started this thing, and people forget that. So that's not the problem. The problem is that Intel has the luxury of holding not only the performance crown, but also the mainstream enthusiast segment, where AMD is only really competing in the very low end range with their APUs and in the desperate AMD fanboy range with their FX CPUs. That's all AMD really has. So, because Intel is not putting any pressure on their enthusiast processors by continuing to sell us quad cores for an entire decade, Intel has said quad core is enough for the mainstream. And you know what? They're probably right, but that isn't the point of what I'm saying. The point is they are not giving us the other stuff because they don't have to. Because the only one putting pressure on the enthusiasts, making us do a cost per performance per core value calculation on the enthusiast chips, is Intel. And they're going, no, that's how much a 6-core costs. Because if you want to spend less, all you can get's a quad core. And you can argue till you're blue in the face about AMD's 6 cores and 8 cores, but let's get real. Performance matters. How many cores you write on the side of the box doesn't matter, and Intel's 8 cores have nothing to do, or rather, AMD's 8 cores have nothing to do with Intel's 8 cores. They're not the same thing.
Yeah, they're not even comparable in terms of like single-threaded and all that. So
no, they're not even. Yeah, it's not even a conversation. So. Am I amped for Zen, knowing that Zen is not necessarily going to go toe-to-toe with the 6700K?
That's not the point of Zen.
Absolutely, I'm amped. Exactly. If Zen gives us great performance at $200, then mission accomplished. AMD will have effectively dramatically increase their average selling price if they can move a bunch of new generation FX, whatever it is they end up calling them, FX Zen CPUs. I actually don't know what the branding is going to be for them. But if they can move a whack ton of those, it'll drive up AMD's ASPs, that's their average sell price. It will improve AMD's profitability, give them money to spend on R&D, which they have been sorely lacking, and maybe give them a shot to come back with another punch after Zen that really puts some pressure on Intel. In the meantime, giving people who want to buy a high-performance value computer a legitimate option, because after the $200 mark, even like closer to $230,
diminishing returns.
Yeah, Intel really starts to lock you down. They kind of go, okay, yeah, we're going to really start to ramp down clock speed. I actually did a lot of analysis on Intel's lineup for a video that I worked on recently called Which Intel CPU Should I Buy? Don't worry, there will be an AMD follow-up, but I'm waiting for Zen because right now the answer is a cheap APU if you want a cheap machine that runs an APU. So I did a lot of research, and you start to get into dual cores really quickly down at the bottom of Intel's lineup. And the reality of it is, when it comes to cost of the silicon, there is no real reason that Intel should still be shipping a dual core, at least not over $100. So I would love for Zen to bring the fight to Intel in that mainstream segment in a real meaningful way. In much the same way that RX 480 has been a smash hit at the $200 to $250 price point, even though AMD doesn't have an answer for anything above that.
Yeah, it's a very similar strategy, you know, because RX 480 is not designed, they're not targeting like the GTX 1080, they're targeting the middle of the market, and it looks like they're going to be doing the same thing with Zen, which makes a lot of sense. I think people are kind of tired of being quote-unquote trapped in, you know, Intel's ecosystem, because if you want like a modern CPU, they're kind of your only option. And you know, in addition to paying like a sort of extra, you know, Intel tax, if you will, on just like you were talking about. So
yeah, and I mean, there's more to modern than just the CPU, because I would even make the argument that, you know, you could buy used Intel hardware. You could go grab a 3770K, overclock that.
It's still a really good processor.
Great processor. Yeah. And, you know, if you want to go back to the enthusiast platform ones, assuming you can find a board, and I talk about this in my What CPU Should I Buy video, but assuming you can find a board, you can go back to something like a 3960X. You can get those on Amazon for like 180, 200 bucks. I saw them used.
Yeah.
And I haven't checked out eBay lately, but like, yeah, you can get like a 6-core for a pretty good value, overclock the snot out of that thing. The problem is the platform. So you're going to be missing a lot of USB 3 ports. You're going to be missing USB 3.1 10 gigabit for sure. You're going to be missing M.2. You're going to be missing things that require BIOS level support, even though the hardware is there. So something like an NVMe SSD that goes into a PCIe slot, you're not going to have support for that.
You're going to be bottlenecked by the interface, by the length of the board, yeah.
Yep, well, not even just that. The motherboard manufacturer has to specifically enable it.
Yeah.
They have to add BIOS support for it. And let's face it, you show me a motherboard manufacturer that cares about their motherboards after the product cycle is over, and I will show you an incredulous face like this.
I like to say I'll put a unicorn in your driveway. Yeah, that's good too.
Yeah. I'll put a unicorn in your incredulous face. Bam! All right. So, let's see. What are people saying? They're saying they have expansion slots, so...
It's not quite...
That is a good point.
Yeah.
But there's some stuff that you will not get with an expansion slot. Thunderbolt comes to mind. Thunderbolt must have support at the board level before you can add an expansion card to it, even though some motherboards do support expansion cards. Notably, the Rampage 5 Extreme that I have in my personal rig doesn't have it on board, but there's a header, like a data header, that you can plug in this specific expansion card, and that specifically will work.
Native support just seems to play more nicely with things overall.
That's right.
So, like I know, like on the upcoming the Kaby Lake from Intel, that is going to have native, I think, USB 3.1, perhaps without needing like an add-in chip.
I think Kaby Lake was also going to add Thunderbolt 3.
That's what I was
It might
thinking.
be both.
No, I think you're right. Actually, it was one or the other. I can't remember. It had 3 in it. I just remember that, but yeah.
All right. So the Flash Memory Summit. This is sort of a big deal if you're into that kind of thing. The original article here is from Engadget. Have you not been able to load this up yet?
I have 2 factors. So
just go get it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Don't worry. I'm all good. I'm all good in the hood. Seagate's new 60 terabyte SSD dwarfs others on the market. And we're talking both in terms of the capacity and in terms of the actual physical size. Now, Seagate's 60 terabyte SSD that they showed off is not the first 3.5-inch SSD that I've ever seen. In fact, let's see if I can find a picture of it. The OCZ Colossus, with a whopping 2-star rating over on newegg.ca here. The OCZ Colossus took a similar approach back in, oh man, when was this? Like around 2013, 2012? Something like that, I want to say, where they just went to a 3.5-inch form factor solely so that they could stuff more flash chips onto a larger PCB in order to ship a capacity that otherwise wasn't possible. The problem with the Colossus, And the reason that you're not going to be buying one of Seagate's 60 terabyte SSDs unless you are, like, I actually have no idea who the customers are for these. No idea.
Video production companies, maybe?
No, I don't think so.
I'm kidding.
I don't think so. Like, who needs 60 terabytes of solid state storage and doesn't already have like on a single drive?
Okay, yeah.
On a single drive with a SAS interface.
I mean, the cheap way, the incredibly cheap response here would be no one will ever need more than 64 KB of RAM, but I said it was a cheap response. You make a good point.
That is a cheap response. Especially the fact that it's on a single drive over well, okay, it's a dual interface drive, but over just a dual SAS interface, instead of being like 60 terabytes of flash storage in like a ginormous server that has oodles and oodles of read and write bandwidth and can handle hundreds and hundreds of thousands of IOPS to like this, ball and interface thing. Anyway, so the problem that they're going to run into is the same one as before. It's a lot of capacity. It's a single interface still, so you're not really getting a performance benefit for the size. And last but not least, there is not really a cost benefit because you still have to buy all of those flash dies. So let's go ahead and see if we can find the, let's see, where is it? Blah, blah, blah. How many packages? Can't remember. It was something ridiculous, and unfortunately, this version of the article doesn't have that information. There was a different one that I was looking at when I was just like tooling around reading about this. But blah, blah, blah. Wow, this is great. The actual marketing line for this is reach 1 petabyte of storage with only 17 drives. Wow. Fantastic. Right now, it is only a demo unit. In fact, we have reached out to Seagate asking if they can get us a unit just for like an episode of holy shit or something like that, because this thing's going to cost like, okay, if I had to guess, I'd say it's going to cost over $25,000 for sure. Probably more, depending on who exactly the target is, because the performance of it is shockingly not that bad. Again, this is something that was covered in the other article I was looking at, and unfortunately isn't in this one. 4 terabytes per watt of power consumption. That's fantastic. Ultra-dense NAND technology from Micron, and uses a unique approach where Seagate is actually still using a single controller to access all of the NAND flash. So then they're just using what are effectively kind of like switch technology to allow each channel of the controller to access many more flash drives than they otherwise would be able to. Is this like a
proprietary controller they developed, or is it something else?
Well, Seagate's been investing very heavily in flash, even though they don't actually fab anything, as I recall. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. And they acquired LSI a little while back.
Yeah, more companies seem to be getting involved. And didn't WD start trying to get involved with NAND?
Yeah, they purchased SanDisk, or maybe that fell through.
No, I think that happened. I remember hearing about it, but I could be wrong. It says it completes
May 12, 2016 completes the acquisition.
So a
of
couple
SanDisk.
months,
Yep.
like 3 months ago, they finished up with that.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, so I guess that's pretty much all there is to it. There's a 60 terabyte SSD, which is 4 times the capacity of the next leading SSD, Samsung's PM1633A, which is a 15 terabyte SSD. We had actually reached out to Samsung. That's in a 2.5-inch form factor, though, by the way. We had actually reached out to Samsung about getting us one of those, and they were not able to do so. Nor did they even reply to our emails. I actually wanted it for a specific project. Mm-hmm. I wanted it for the world's most expensive PlayStation 4. A water-cooled PlayStation 4 with, 15 terabytes of solid-state storage. I thought that'd be pretty cool, but no. All right, also from the Flash Summit, Toshiba, and the original article here is from the register.co.uk. Toshiba teases an even higher capacity SSD.
Quad level cell?
Yes.
I'm assuming that's what the Q stands for.
Yeah, so 4 bits per cell, which we should probably explain a little bit.
There's a fastest possible episode about bits per cell.
Why don't you do that explanation? I've been doing a lot of talking. I'm going to go get a drink of water. You explain why QLC Flash matters.
Yeah. Okay, it's been a while since I've looked at this, but the gist of it is that So if you are buying an SSD, usually what you'll see on the product page is it'll indicate whether the SSD is SLC, MLC, or TLC. And what that refers to is how many bits of data each little memory cell inside the NAND flash can hold. So an SLC drive can only hold 1 bit per cell, whereas a TLC drive can hold 3. And more sounds better as far as it just more obviously sounds better, but the capacity, but as far as capacity, it sounds better. But usually TLC drives, they tend to be a little bit slower performance-wise. So this is a new QLC drive that holds 4 bits per cell. So we might be able to see some really good capacities with it. And indeed, they're teasing this. I guess it's a prototype, but they're teasing it as being 100 terabytes. There's not a whole lot that's been confirmed right now on this. It looks like it's all talk. The QLC technology was also released very recently. It looks like it would be a 3D SSD. So I guess the company that's most famous for this is Samsung, because they marketed their 3D SSDs pretty heavily, where instead of having the chips all on one plane, they're actually stacked like so. So it'll increase the data density. So we're looking at a 3D SSD with a PCIe Gen 3 interface. So it's not SATA, it's PCI Express. Over 100 terabytes of capacity, and oh, hi Linus.
Hey.
3 gigabytes a second sequential read, and 1 gigabyte per second sequential write.
3 gigabytes per second?
Yeah, that's quite a bit more than, like, Samsung has their 950, which is I think their highest end thing right now that I can find. But 3 I think is almost a whole gig higher than that, if my memory serves me correctly.
Yeah, and it's not
really
even
fast.
NVMe either, because this is let's see, what interface is it even using? Blah 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 blah.
Well, that's a big deal, isn't it? Because more bits per cell usually means it's a bit slower, yeah. So
yeah, but I mean,
but because it's 3D and it's NVMe, so
there's a couple of things to bear in mind here. So you've got a lot of NAND dies. You have many flash chips that you can read from and you can write to. So assuming your controller isn't a bottleneck, assuming you have a sophisticated enough controller, you can do these massive throughput numbers. Mm-hmm. Even though we're talking QLC flash, which it surprises me that they're putting this in an enterprise product first, quite frankly.
Well, I think it seems to be focused more on kind of like playing the copy-paste game or moving huge files around, because also you look at the random read and write, which is measured in IOPS.
Yes.
It's only 50,000 and 14,000 for read-write respectively, and it's extremely easy to find very affordable consumer-level SATA SSD. I think SATA SSDs, SATA SSDs that have numbers way above that. So it seems to be more suited for a media farm where you're moving around huge files where you get those sorts of like really good speeds.
Like something that I would even, okay, so here again, here's something I would wonder. Are you even better off? Let's say you were one of Netflix's things where they want to install their hardware in an ISP's space. Mm-hmm. Right, so the term is escaping me, but it's Friday, okay? It's Friday.
It's been a long week for everyone.
So if I was Netflix, the idea is I want to use as little rack space as possible. Mm-hmm. I want to store as many movies as I can, and I want to serve as many customers without unnecessary delays and buffering as I can. So very high capacity drives look like, well, hey, that might be a very, very, very good idea. Mm-hmm. Except that by the time you are starting to hit these drives with a lot of random operations, are they even any better off than mechanical?
Well, couldn't you split your workload then? Like let's say just accesses to your web page, or things like validating a login. Couldn't you do that with like something faster on the random, and then just have these do nothing but host videos?
And then if you were going to do that, if you're going to split the workload anyway, then why don't you spread out this data over more drives so that people are less likely to be trying to hit the same thing at the same time?
Well, you could just like buy a bunch of these and array them together, but then that would get very expensive probably. So
this is kind of scary. The QLC drive would have a 3 petabyte to 6 petabyte workload over its lifetime. So what does that workload over its lifetime? What that sounds like to me is that you could only write this drive, and correct me if I'm wrong, somewhere between 30 to 60 times?
Okay, so a petabyte's 1,000 TB. So a million gigabytes, yeah, would be a petabyte.
Yeah.
Yeah, that actually, yeah, you think of it as something like Netflix. So it seems like you would have to get a lot of these.
So, well, no,
for it to be.
So you write, I mean, they only change their library every once in a while.
Uh-huh.
So as long as they're smart about how they utilize them, maybe it helps. Oh, no, okay, so hold on a second. This is using a PCI Express interface, by the way. I think I might have said it was SAS or something before, but...
Yeah, no, it's PCIe.
Let's move into sponsors for today. Number one is Squarespace, and Nick isn't here, so I don't have to do the Squarespace read the way he says to do it. So I'm going to say, Squarespace! Old slogans abound. Squarespace has many slogans, some of which were very good. Like, I personally liked Build It Beautiful a lot, and some of them, well... should have been changed. Like Squarespace, you should. But they did change it. Yeah, they change it all the time. Now it appears to be Squarespace. Set your website apart by using one of our templated designs. Okay, no, but really, Squarespace is a great way to build a website, and not all Squarespace sites look the same. They have a wide variety of different templates, and once you gussy them up with artwork, you customize them, you put your own copy on there, boom, you end up with a gorgeous website that just freaking works all the time. Squarespace allows you to edit your website through their cloud-based tool. They, they handle all the hosting, so you don't have to worry about like a server somewhere that you might accidentally throw a USB drive or whatever the case may be. And our Squarespace site, this is such a fun fact, our Squarespace site has never gone down. LinusMediaGroup.com, well, okay, it did go down, but that was a domain registrar issue that actually had, so we were directing the domain to the wrong place due to a compromised account, etc., etc. Anyway, it did not go down because of Squarespace's service. All their templates are feature responsive design, so it means they look great on any size screen. They've got commerce that comes with every site, so you can sell stuff on your page if you want to. And their cover pages feature allows you to be one of those obnoxious Web 2.0 companies who has no information on their website whatsoever other than the name of the company and like a slogan.
They have video backgrounds now too.
Please don't make those sites. But if you must, make it using Squarespace. You can save 10% off your first purchase by heading over to, squarespace.com/WAN. And by the way, you can try it for free for a couple of weeks to just decide if it's right for you. There's no credit card required. Speaking of trying things, have you ever thought to yourself, gee, I'd sure like to learn something today, but going to school is expensive and a lot of work, and my life is busy and I have stuff to do? Well, lynda.com could be the solution for you. It's used by literally millions of people around the world, which if you go and crunch the numbers, means that lynda.com at, $25 a month is where their plans start, is like a pretty ballin' company. Seriously, like ballin', which I guess is why they sponsor the WAN show, and also because they're just generally good guys. We have a number of people here at Linus Media Group that use skills they learned on lynda.com to get ahead in life by getting a job at Linus Media Group. They've got more than 3,000 courses available in topics like web development, photography, visual design, business, software training like Excel, WordPress, Photoshop, things like digital camera operation, video editing. That's pretty cool. I don't know what you're doing right now. Oh, you're touching the screen. Okay, that's good. They show you how to operate computers. Actually, they have tons of different courses, and they're taught by industry experts with new courses added every week. So whether you want to take your hobby to the next level or you want to take your career to the next level, try out lynda.com and find out if it's right for you. There's a free 10-day trial at lynda.com/WAN show. And then, no, I do not have an offer code for that. So sorry, but it's worth it.
I'm not sure what you're doing. Reading the WAN doc.
Me?
No, what you just said to me.
No, I just know.
What are you doing over there?
I couldn't see the screen through the microphone, and you were just like kind of like, it looked like you were kind of like fawning at the screen or something. I was like, is he playing like the? Well, I just wasn't sure what was going on. I wasn't sure what was going on. All right, Denuvo has been successfully cracked. This has been a long time coming, actually. Denuvo has held up surprisingly well. So for those of you who don't know, Denuvo is a copy protection scheme for games, and it's over. It has been successfully cracked with both Doom and Rise of the Tomb Raider apparently already available online with a functional bypass for Denuvo's anti-tampering technology. The crack was created by a Bulgarian hacker called Voxy. Voxy. Can you do a Bulgarian accent?
I have no idea what they sound like in Bulgaria.
All right. Well, he's also working on a crack for Just Cause 3, along with several other recent Denuvo titles. The crack exploits a bug in Steam, which allows users to play the full game while Steam thinks the game is a free demo version. It appears as though, given that this is a Steam exploit, that it could be fixed with a Steam update, so it may not be functional for long. So there you have it. So you will either have to buy the game, or you will have to never update Steam again.
DRM versus hackers. It's just like a never-ending battle.
All right. Quantum Break is officially coming to Steam. This is in our rapid-fire news topics. Let's go ahead and drop that in the Twitch chat in case you guys are sort of curious about it at all. Let's go. The original article here is from overclock3d.net. I will go ahead and go back to my thing. So basically, it's coming September 14th, 2016, so in about a month. This will end its exclusivity in the Windows Store. I would love to say that I think this is because Microsoft just has the best interests of gamers at heart and wants to support a more open ecosystem. In fact, they've even made some statements that would seem to support that kind of do not walk on the green screen. Second person I've caught doing that today. We're going to have to repaint that whole thing. That is a hassle. That is a royal hassle.
Hashtag fired.
No, he's not fired. I'm just... If he does it again, he might be. Oh, man. Anyway, sorry. It includes all the updates that are available in the Windows 10 Store version, will support DirectX 11, and will not be a universal Windows platform game, meaning that any of the limitations that come with that, whether they're related to benchmarking, multi-GPU, or whatever the case may be, frame rate limits, will not be imposed on it.
I'm still a little bit surprised that games that there are Windows App Store. No, sorry, not Windows App Store, just Windows Store exclusive games.
Yeah.
It surprises me a little bit.
By the time it sinks in for you, my hope is that it will be over.
Yeah, there you go.
But then again, they've demonstrated, as they did with Games for Windows Live, that they're willing to stick with a terrible thing for an awful long time before giving up.
That's kind of human nature, I guess.
So...
Yeah. Well, this thing is basically on fire, but let's stick with it anyway.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. All right. Let's go ahead and... oh, this is kind of fun. So the first commercial mission to the moon approved for Florida company Moon Express. I already love the name of their company.
It sounds like a Planet Express from Futurama.
It really...
It's like a delivery service to the moon.
I have to wonder if it's intentional. Like, I hope it's intentional. That's freaking awesome. So the U.S. government has given them the go-ahead to launch the first commercial mission to the moon. So the Moon Express CEO and co-founder said, "It's a huge milestone for us. Not quite as catchy as one small step for man, one large, whatever, leap? Giant leap, thank you, for mankind. Not quite as catchy as that, but maybe he didn't have quite as long to write it, given that he didn't sit in a spacecraft for, a long time before he got there. I wonder what the story is behind that. I'm sure it's been talked about, like whether it was spontaneous or whether he thought about it and planned it.
It had to require at least a few minutes of pre-planning.
I mean, it's frustrating because you're a sports fan,
yeah.
So you'll be able to relate to this.
Mm-hmm.
It's frustrating because the greatest moments in sports are sometimes made as much by the commentator as they are by the athlete.
Oh yeah.
Because they put it in the appropriate context, they get you amped up for it, they make the moment something that goes beyond a fantastic athletic feat and something that becomes culturally iconic. Because you can okay, so the Bobby Orr goal.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing to watch. But with that commentary. Thank you. With that commentary, it's something that like is like moving to a hockey fan anyway. Most people wouldn't care. Doesn't it drive you crazy when you can tell that they had a sheet of paper in front of them with like epic moment quotes that they've been thinking up over the last month, and they just say one?
Oh, you can always tell when it's like, oh, you were staying up late at night last week just trying to think of this stuff, and now you have your moment to use it.
American commentators are the worst. I'm sorry.
In what regard, though? You could be right depending on like
doing
what it
that.
Is.
I notice it so much less on Canadian broadcasts. The contrived fake nonsense on a big game win, especially when it's like not a close game, like when the outcome has basically been decided since the middle of the second period or
like,
beginning of the third quarter or whatever sport. Where like they've got like this quote that they were obviously saving that makes it sound like all epic, like an epic triumph when it was just kind of a beatdown.
I've actually seen. I don't disagree with you, but I have seen it in other countries as well. Like if I'm watching the Premier League in English soccer, there could be a game put away by halftime, and then the announcer will go on in this golf announcer style drone for the second 45 minutes, and then when the final whistle goes, and there it is, and I'm just like, okay, like so. Your point is very well taken, though. I understand what you're saying.
All right, so back to going to the moon. The company has raised more than $30 million so far and plan to unveil their MX-1E lander at the Cape Canaveral Air Station. The first launch is targeted for late 2017. Mm-hmm. This is kind of funny. The FAA has not actually issued a launch license yet, and that will be considered separately from the mission itself. So while they do have permission to travel between Earth's stratosphere and the moon and land there, they do not have permission to
actually. Which layer of the atmosphere does the FAA's jurisdiction end?
I actually don't know.
I don't know either. So
I don't know. If you ask the FAA, maybe it never ends.
You know what? It wouldn't surprise me.
All right. What else we got?
Oh, the Kansas thing I thought was pretty.
Okay, let's
cool.
move on to that. Where is that?
Oh, where is that indeed? I saw it.
Kansas Farm sues MaxMind over, quote, massive IP glitch, unquote. So let's go ahead. I'll pull up the original article from the Washington Post. You want to go ahead and get us going on this?
Yeah, so this is pretty nuts. So MaxMind is a company out of Waltham, Massachusetts, actually right across the river from where I lived when I was in law school. And they are a company that maps IP addresses to geographical areas. Now, what they did is they had one point that they considered the default center of the U.S. So, and this was...
And therefore center of the universe.
Exactly.
Hashtag Canadian commentary.
Okay, so, and basically what this is, what the geographic center of a country or anything else is suppose you had a cardboard cutout shaped exactly like the U.S. and you balanced it on a pin. The geographic center is where it would bounce, like where the pin would be. And this happened to be very close to these folks' house that lived in Kansas. And so what ended up happening is all this IP traffic was being mapped back to essentially their front yard. And what ended up happening was for years they had cops showing up at their door at all hours, accusing them of being involved in all sorts of crime or whatever other shenanigans, and they were just this like random elderly couple that lived on the farm or something that had no idea what was going on.
So basically, MaxMind is responsible for mapping IP addresses, and they used this geographical center as the default location for any US-based IP address. Mm-hmm. So let's say that, oh man, like what even would be an example of something that didn't have a proper IP address and they just default, like why would they even be doing this?
It was a little bit unclear from the story, honestly. Maybe if someone was like, using a VPN, but even then, like.
So sometimes when mapping IPs, apparently they are able to only determine the country of origin.
That's it, yeah. Okay.
So there it is.
So if all they know is, oh, you're somewhere in the United States, you get mapped to this random place in Kansas.
I mean, these are some of the complaints that this poor family has been dealing with. They've been accused of interrupting email service for customers of a certain small business. They've been accused of harboring a stolen vehicle, harboring runaway children, and keeping girls in the house to make pornographic films. I mean,
I really like how that last one was in quotation marks, but. Yeah, so it says, ambulances have appeared to prepare to save suicidal persons. FBI agents, federal marshals, IRS collectors, and other law enforcement officers have appeared on their doorsteps at all hours of the day and night, and even one random morning, a broken toilet was left in their driveway without explanation.
All right, so MaxMind has since changed their default location in the U.S. to the center of a lake west of Wichita. But in the meantime, the Arnolds have filed a lawsuit against MaxMind seeking compensatory and punitive damages in excess of $75,000.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yes.
So the reason they chose that dollar amount in excess of $75,000, so here's the reason for this. Super quick crash course in jurisdiction in American law. So they filed the case in federal court, and if you want to file something in federal court in the U.S., there's you can do it in one of two ways. One is if it involves a federal question or a federal law, but the other is if there's what's called diversity of citizenship, whereas the two parties, in this case the old couple and MaxMind, are from two different states, and they are. And the amount in controversy is above $75,000. So that's why there's a sort of vague in excess. We want in excess of 75 grand. Like, who knows how much the actual amount they'll get will be? But that is just sort of like a venue selection trick to get them into federal court as opposed to state court. So.
Oh, I see. Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's move on to a pretty important rumor. So the original post here is actually from the Linus Tech Tips forum, because I think they are quickly being wiped out. And I'm not going to say anything about this because I may or may not actually have real information. But basically here, there's an Imgur post of what appears to be, I'm going to read it word for word. It is this Imgur post that is the entire source of everything that I'm saying. It appears to be an Asus ROG Strix G752VM-GC033T 7.3 inch, what seems to be a laptop of some sort. This potentially completely photoshopped page says that it seems to be a laptop because it has a Core i7 6700HQ processor word next to this picture of what appears to be a laptop. So I guess the implication being that one of those is inside one of those. DDR4 8 gig RAM, 256 GB SSD M.2, 1 TB 7200 RPM something. That's a word in a language that I don't understand.
Norwegian.
NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1060 6 GB. So the implication is that a laptop with a GTX 1060 6 GB could potentially be a thing for 19,999 of whatever the devil these are.
Norwegian krone.
Is that right?
I think that's what it said. I wish Luke were here because Luke is very good at Scandinavian currency. We were having a discussion about this the other day.
That's an interesting talent.
Don't worry about it.
So an interesting, actually no, I'm not going to point out anything that's interesting about it. There were also some, let's see if any of the other listings are still live. It looks like this stuff is being pulled down. So all the links that were originally given for expert.no are, nope, not, I don't know what any of this is, but it definitely isn't that. So, very, very interesting. Very interesting.
I like Scandinavian letters.
Where is Luke anyway?
Britain. That's as much information as I have.
That's all the information I have too. All right. Self-driving Tesla. Original article here is from thetelegraph.co.uk. saves a man's life by steering him to the hospital. So this opens up an let's go through the basics of the story first. So original article from Telegraph. Oh, I think I already said that. Originally posted by Fake ZZ on the forum. So his Tesla Model X is credited with having helped save an American man's life after its autopilot function got him to the hospital when he suffered a pulmonary embolism. The man's name is Joshua Neely, a lawyer from Springfield, Missouri. He called his wife and said something was wrong, that he couldn't breathe, and thinking it would be quicker than pulling over to call an ambulance, he set the autopilot autonomous function of the Tesla Model X. He just got the car a few weeks before this happened. He doesn't remember much after he set the mode, as the car drove him over 20 miles to Branson. He managed to steer the car the last mile or so between the motorway and the hospital. So, this is an interesting debate. How is it that we consider Tesla's autopilot record? Because a couple people have died now. Do they get one in the bank if autopilot saves a life?
Is that how it works? Like life saved versus lives taken?
I don't know. I'm not making the rules for this. I'm just asking questions. We're gonna straw poll this, friends. We have got to straw poll this. Go ahead. Hit me.
I mean, I feel like this was inevitable when whoever's idea this was first said, "Hey, why don't we try to make a self-driving car?" But I don't know, how do you measure something like this, whether or not like this is a good or bad thing? Because okay, I'll say this. So, how much testing has been done versus death rate? Because people who just drive regular cars both kill themselves and other people all the time.
Yeah.
So, even though it's easy to say, oh, you can't trust these computers to drive cars, if their fatality rate is still much lower than, some random person behind the wheel.
But you're okay. The problem, though, is that you're approaching this from a very scientific standpoint, like a purely fact-based standpoint. And the reality of it is, even for people who care more about facts than feelings, let's say it was your mom who died in a self-driving car. Do you care that the odds were better for her, like that the overall odds, like fewer people would die if we were all in self-driving cars? Do you care? Your mom's dead. And maybe wouldn't have been dead if she had been operating the steering wheel. Like, that's something to consider, is that while it's easy to kind of go, oh, the greater good and this and that, that doesn't change that you're going to be dealing with people who are inherently emotionally distraught and very upset and prepared to make a very loud noise about why self-driving cars are bad if someone close to them dies in one or is seriously injured in one. Whereas we all accept, just because we've all been born into a world where cars operated by people are the norm, we all accept the risks that come along with a manually operated car.
People also like to feel like they're in control, which is why people tend to be more afraid of flying than they are of driving. Even though flying is statistically much safer, you have a feeling of not being in control, and if something goes wrong, there's nothing you can do about it.
That's right. And I would also make the argument that flying is a much more terrifying way to die. Because I can think of very few scenarios where you won't have an awful lot of time to think about it.
Yeah, and you just like plummet for quite a while. I don't know what the terminal velocity of a human being is, but it's not that high.
Yeah.
So
no, it's not. So we've got 65% of you saying yes, we can evaluate autopilot systems on the bank system.
Well, to be fair,
one in, one out, you come out net even.
When these start becoming more mainstream, I feel like this is how we're going to make decisions on them. Like, this is how governments are going to regulate them. This is the way that companies are going to be approaching safety. So it's ultimately going to affect like how people use them. So I don't know. I'm wondering with the whole, the March of Progress and all that, like I'm wondering how much voices of people that, oh, I lost a loved one in a self-driving car accident, and maybe I wouldn't have had they actually been controlling the car. I wonder if those voices will just end up being lost in the conversation, because ultimately I think we're going to make decisions based on more what are the numbers. So.
I don't know. I mean, the thing is that it's pretty hard to lose a voice in the conversation these days with social media being what it is.
That's true, yeah.
I mean, people can, through amplification factors like Twitter and Reddit, people
all it takes is one viral incident,
That's
and
right.
then suddenly the conversation changes, at least a little bit, so.
And at the end of the day, I mean, any politician is at the mercy of the voters.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever they can do quietly behind closed doors that is something that their voters wouldn't agree with is all fine and good. But as soon as something goes viral and there's a bunch of pressure and it looks like they might actually not get reelected, if you're a career politician, not getting reelected is like getting fired, effectively.
Exactly.
Or if you're, let's say, a senator and you have to go back to being the mayor of, Three Sticks, Nebraska, then it's like getting a huge demotion.
Mm-hmm. And with the incumbency advantage, it does become a career. I don't know how it is in Canada, but like in the U.S. House, incumbency success rate in the election is like over 90%. Like most of these people were there for a long time.
So basically, we're looking at something that is potentially very emotional and can be driven by fear.
Absolutely.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, how many self or like autonomous vehicles other than cars are there? There still really aren't all that many. Like most metro systems and train systems, they have a human conductor or a human driver.
I don't think the SkyTrain has one. I think there might be a remote controller though. I'm actually not sure.
As slow as a SkyTrain is, I don't see how it matters. But
okay, if you're gonna hate on the SkyTrain, hate on the SkyTrain right. Okay, the SkyTrain doesn't go anywhere. It covers such a tiny fraction of the Greater Vancouver area that it's basically irrelevant.
Our mass transit in North Carolina is a joke too. I'm not trying to pick on Vancouver. It's bad. So.
All right. Well, speaking of things that are bad, the end of the show is bad because the show's ending, not because the show's bad. Or maybe the show was bad.
Well, that would make sense. If it was a bad show, it would be good at its ending. So yes.
Maybe I'll do a straw poll. Is the show bad or the end bad? The show is bad.
K-show was bad. Actually, leave it like that. It's perfect.
The end is bad. This poll is bad. All right, let's find out what's bad. And I did not put an option for Michael Jackson. Oh. All right. It has been a long week.
It's been a very long week.
I don't even know why. Probably because last week was a holiday week.
We're also a little bit short-handed this week.
Yeah, we're a little short-handed this week. What was Luke not here? Brandon's out today.
Mm-hmm.
What was people hating? People hating. They're saying every single voter is saying something's bad. It's like, look at this negativity.
They mostly hate your poll.
They mostly hate my poll.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you one person who doesn't hate my poll.
I'm not going to say it.
See you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.